Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to COS at Home. I am your host, Jonathan Viaud, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. As you can see, though, we're missing someone very important at the moment. Unfortunately, we found out a short time ago that our guest and dear friend, Congressman Chip Roy, was not able to join us for the webinar tonight as weather caused a travel delay that conflicted with this interview. We will have Congressman Roy join us hopefully next month. So I hope that you come back and listen to that conversation, because it really will be a great one. And I look forward to talking with Congressman Roy. He's got a unique perspective, right? Serving right now, as I would put it, behind enemy lines in Washington, D.C. Last year was particularly crazy with the House of Representatives and fights over the speaker. So I want to hear from Congressman Roy and get his perspective, and I think it will be an important one. So I hope that you'll join us next month once we have Congressman Roy officially scheduled and we avoid any travel and hopefully weather issues. And I hope that you'll join us for that conversation. However, we at Convention of States, we believe that the show must go on. So tonight, I want to take a moment to talk about some of the changes we'll be making to COS at Home, including some segments that we'll be debuting later in the program. I will also share a legislative update and outlook for 2024. So be sure to stick around for that. But first, I want to share a little bit about me and my buddy O'Malley over here. As you already know, my name is Jonathan Viaud, and in addition to hosting this wonderful program, I also serve as a regional director and political liaison for Convention of States. Although I'm a proud resident of the great free state of Florida, I did grow up in a small town in northern New Jersey. When I graduated from high school, I wasn't really sure what profession or career I wanted to pursue. I bounced around a few colleges, switching majors, and finally I settled on earning a degree in history and focusing on becoming a history teacher. Unfortunately, those plans were interrupted when I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. Although I was able to graduate with my degree, I spent the first 2 years after college fighting for my life. By the grace of God, after many different treatments and a transplant, I defeated cancer once and for all in October of 2012. Although along the way, I happened to meet a nurse who I started dating. She introduced me to this guy on the radio that I had never heard of before, named Mark Levin. As many of you who have listened to the great one yourselves, once you start tuning in to Mark Levin, it's really, really hard to tune out. And I very quickly became a Levinite. For my birthday in September of 2013, I was given Mark Levin's latest book, The Liberty Amendments. That book talked about the way we can solve the problems caused by the federal government through the use of the second clause of Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution. Despite years of learning about U.S. history, I never knew there was a second clause in Article 5 and another way that we could amend the Constitution with the states being in complete control, going around Congress and making these changes. Immediately, I understood this was the way we could return our country to the self-governing society our founding fathers intended when they created the Constitution. Realizing this was the solution, I began to search for any organization that would be willing to use this tool. In fact, at the time, there were a couple of different organizations just getting started. There was a movement that held a convention or thereabouts, not an Article 5 convention, but a group of people that gathered at Mount Vernon in Virginia and talked about Article 5. But thankfully, I was able to come across an organization known as Convention of States, known as the Convention of States Project at the time. It's a project of Citizens for Self-Governance. I attended a debate that was taking place in New Jersey between one of their founders, Michael Farris, and one of the members of Eagle Forum named Andy Schlafly. And I was blown away by everything that Michael Farris had to say that evening. And I quickly signed up to become a district captain. I went on to be state communications coordinator and ultimately served as the state director for the New Jersey team before being offered a job as a regional director. Oh, I should also mention that the nurse, yeah, I did the smart thing and I married her. But the best part of the story, honestly, truthfully, the best part of the story is that after going through all of the chemotherapy treatments and that stem cell transplant, the doctors told me it was unlikely that I would be able to have children. Well, thankfully, the Lord works in his own way. And in December of 2019, my daughter was born in the same hospital that my wife and I met. That is the best part of the story by far. So why am I sharing this with you? What does it matter to you? Well, the reason that I wanted to share my story with you tonight is to explain why I do what I do. I have been granted incredible blessings in my life, and frankly, I don't deserve any of them. In addition to being blessed with an amazing wife and a beautiful daughter, I am blessed to live in the greatest, freest country the world has ever known. As many parents would know, we always want what's best for our children. We always want them to live better lives than we live. We want them to have more prosperity and more freedom. Sadly, we live in a time in American history that if we do not act, we will leave posterity with nothing but debt and tyranny. Article 5 of the Constitution provides us with the mechanism to implement real change to a federal government that no longer represents the interests of we the people, but rather the interests of a small group of elites that believe they know what is truly best for you and me. Of course, merely using Article 5 to hold a convention that would reduce the size and scope of the federal government, impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, and place term limits on all members of Congress and federal officials won't be enough, right? That's what we're advocating for with Convention of States, but that's our goal. Our mission with Convention of States goes much further. Our mission statement is to build an engaged army of self-governing grassroots citizens, or the way I prefer to say it, to restore a culture of self-governance. To do that, we have to be engaged at all levels, from our school boards to the halls of Congress. I'm extremely proud of all the accomplishments we have had as an organization, but the reason we have been successful is because of people like you. Our activists are everyday citizens that love this country and know that being a self-governing citizen does not stop after we show up on election day and vote for our favorite candidate. No, to influence real change, we have to vote, we have to monitor legislative sessions, and then we have to ensure laws are enforced and obeyed. Your favorite governor, whoever it is, your favorite legislator, whoever he or she may be, is not going to be monitoring the halls of your child's school or checking what books are on display at your local library. No, as our friend Steve Deace has observed, the cavalry ain't coming. The solution is in the mirror. If my daughter and your children or grandchildren are going to grow up in a free nation, then it's going to have to be because we work to make sure it remains free. So I hope you will consider joining us. And to do so, as I often say, please go on over to conventionofstates.com, click on that Take Action tab, and sign up to become a volunteer. All right, so with that monologue out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to a couple other things that we're going to be discussing tonight. As I mentioned, I want to give you a legislative update and kind of talk to you about where we are with the Convention of States movement as of today in January. I also want to go through what some of the changes are going to be for COS at home as we move into 2024 and hopefully beyond, and also go through a mailbag segment of the program. So first, let's talk about the legislative update. To date, we officially have 19 states that have passed the COS resolution. They are Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, West Virginia, and Wisconsin. Whew, I had to write that down. One state, Kansas, I consider to be an unofficial pass state, and here's why. Last year, we passed in Kansas in both the House and the Senate with clear majorities in both chambers. However, Kansas has a rule known as the Roe Rule, which states that in order for Kansas to submit an Article 5 application to Congress, it must pass both chambers with 2/3 majorities. And unfortunately, even though we had clear majorities in both chambers, We did not have 2/3 of both chambers passing our resolution. So currently, there is a lawsuit that was filed by legislators in Kansas to challenge this rule in federal court. We ultimately believe that this rule is unconstitutional because in order to impact a federal function of the state legislature, and calling an Article 5 convention is a federal function for the state legislature, then to make that change, you have to change the US Constitution. So we're hopeful and we're praying that that case will be agreed upon by the judges of the federal court, and that ultimately Kansas will retroactively become the 20th state to pass the COS resolution. So that leaves us with 14 or 15 states left in order for us to get to a convention. And this year, there are 14 states that have filed our resolution already. And they're not the only ones, but so far 14 have done so. They're Delaware, Illinois, Iowa, Kentucky, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, South Dakota, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Vermont, and Washington. Yesterday, we had our very first committee hearing of the year in Massachusetts. Before you dismiss them as nothing but a blue state, our Massachusetts team has worked incredibly hard, pardon O'Malley here, with legislators in Massachusetts, and we successfully passed our resolution through the same legislature in 2022. Our primary sponsor, Representative Steve Zaros, will be a future guest on COS at Home to talk about what our activists have accomplished in the Bay State, how activists flooded the hearing room yesterday despite cold, snowy weather, and much more, right? And we talk in this fashion where we say red states, blue states. The beauty of what Convention of States is all about, though, is that it's not a Republican thing, it's not a Democrat thing, it's not conservative or liberal. It's a we the people thing, right? It's us against the elites in Washington, D.C., or that small group of elites that think that they know better than we do. And so when we talk about states, when we say red states or blue states, the fact of the matter is the states that currently have Republican majorities in the House and the Senate are the states that have been more open to our resolution. But that doesn't mean that only red states will pass our resolution. And the Massachusetts team is proving that by working strongly with their legislators, building up relationships, and ultimately they were able to pass a chamber in the Massachusetts pass through a committee in the Massachusetts legislature. We haven't gotten the floor vote, but hopefully we will be able to do that as they continue to work hard. So it's important to remember that when we talk about the red states and the blue states, we're just talking about it more so from a perspective of whether or not they're open to Convention of States and open to what we're trying to accomplish or not. And frankly, if we work hard and we build the relationships and we do the type of work that I was referring to earlier and get involved with Convention of States, if you help us out, we're going to be successful in more states, including those blue states. And we need them, right? We need the blue states or the purple states, the states that may have split legislatures. We need them to join us in order for us to get to 34 states. And we need 4 more states after that to pass an amendment and get it ratified, to the Constitution. So that work is done by you and done by me. That's how we're going to accomplish this. So don't dismiss states. If you're in a state like New Jersey or Massachusetts or California or New York, and you feel like all hope is lost because you've got a Democrat legislature and they're focused on all of these things, hope is not lost. You do have an opportunity. Massachusetts proves it. Other states have also had successes. And in fact, let's go ahead and take a look exactly what I mean by other states have had successes. I want to take a minute to show you where you can find this information yourselves if you ever have the question. In fact, it's usually one of the #1 questions we get on this program, and Cindy Nation, who looks out at our emails, will always get questions from people. How many states do we have passed? Which states have passed? How many more states do we have to go, right? Well, we answered that tonight, right? 19 states have passed officially. one has passed, but they don't know it yet. So that means we need 14, 15 states more to call a convention. We're over halfway. We're getting really, really close here, folks. And we can get that much closer if you get involved. But where do we find that information? Well, of course, you go to conventionofstates.com. So if you'll give me a minute here, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with all of you. I haven't done this all that often, though, so forgive me. Let's see here. I'm not seeing how to do it, so I don't want to waste time, folks. I will get that figured out, though, before our next program, so that we can show it to you. But if you go to conventionofstates.com, what you'll see is you'll be automatically, the first thing you'll see is how to step into the new year. Somebody just helped me out here. Thank you very much, whoever behind the scenes helped me here. Let me show you my screen. Okay. That's not the screen I want to show you. Let's see. That's what I want to show you. So if you go to conventionofstates.com, the first thing you'll see here is an ad about stepping into the new year in 2024. You'll be able to sign the petition if you haven't done so already. And if you continue to scroll down on the page, you'll learn a little bit more. Why call an Article 5 convention? What is an Article 5 convention anyway? And then you'll see, so are you making any progress? And there's a little button here that you can click on that is the progress map. And this will show you all of the states that have passed our resolution. Those are the green states that have passed our resolution. The states in yellow are the states that have passed in one chamber historically. Okay, so that's states that have passed that. They may not currently have legislation that's gotten through one chamber. Actually, there's one state, I'll tell you who they are in just a minute. But these are historically the states that have passed through one chamber of their legislature, right? New Mexico, Wyoming, South Dakota, Iowa, Virginia, North Carolina, and New Hampshire. North Carolina is the state that currently has legislation that has passed one chamber. Only needs to get through one more chamber, right? So if you were to say, who's the leader in the clubhouse to becoming state number 20 or 21, depending on how you look at it, it'd be North Carolina, because North Carolina's already gotten through the House. They just have to get through the Senate. It's been a challenge for those of you in North Carolina that haven't been a part of Convention of States. You're going to want to reach out to your state senator and tell them you want them to support this Article 5 resolution. So you want to get involved there. But this is how you can go and you can learn more, and you can hover over the states. And as you can see, Florida, it tells you when it passed, celebrating their 10th anniversary this year here in Florida. Georgia also celebrating their 10th anniversary this year, and Alaska is also celebrating its 10th anniversary. But other states you can see as well. Texas, we passed in 2017, Arkansas in 2019, Wisconsin in 2022, and so on and so forth. So you can hover over these states, you can click on it, it will bring you to some other pages where you can learn more information about your state, and also ways that you can reach your state legislator as well and send them a personal note. So that's how you would go and view the progress that we are making in Convention of States. I know that's, again, one of the #1 questions that we get. Okay. So that's the legislative update that I have for you, and this is going to be a regular feature on COS at Home as we move forward. We're going to try to make a part of the program a segment where we're talking about the legislative successes that we're having throughout the year. So that's going to be part of the show as we move forward. And so let's talk a little bit more about what the future holds for COS at Home. And to do that, let me first take you back and explain to you where this idea came from and why we call it COS at Home. Well, it started, as you can imagine, during COVID back in 2020 when I was the state director of New Jersey. And the reason that it started there in New Jersey was because one of the things that we did the best in New Jersey was we had in-person meetings that took place every month. We had actually 4 in-person meetings that took place across the state of New Jersey every month. And that was really a major building block for us in building relationships with one another and growing the team. And I'm happy to say that the New Jersey team is now up to 9 meetings per month. So well done, New Jersey team. But when COVID took place and everything shut down and there was a lot of uncertainty, we weren't meeting in person and face to face. And so I was having a conversation with my regional director at the time, Monica Sellers, and I said, how do we keep this conversation going? How do we keep connecting with people? And what we came up with was doing a webinar. We asked Mark Meckler to come on and do the very first webinar with us, and I believe it was in April of 2020, and we called it COS at Home because everyone was stuck at home. And it was just a New Jersey exclusive webinar at the time, but it had a lot of success. We had a lot of people join. And I said, well, you know what, let's see if we can keep this going. And I reached out to other guests like Pete Hegseth and Steve Dace and Michael Farris and Rick Green. And to my surprise, they all said, sure, we'd be happy to come on and talk with you in New Jersey. And this is, again, what I'm saying. When if you're in a blue state, you can make things happen, right? I mean, this is where this idea came from. And you'll hear Mark talk about it often. Some of the best ideas that we have in Convention of States come from our grassroots. So this show was very successful, very popular. We eventually opened it up to some other states as well to come on and be a part of this conversation that we were having. And when I was brought onto the national staff as a regional director, I took this show and this program national. And in December of 2020, we launched. We had Mark Meckler come on, and we've had many, many guests come on over the years. A couple of guests have come on multiple times. You've seen a number of them. Steve Dace, Pete Hegseth, Mark, of course, Senator Santorum, Michael Farris have been on multiple times. And we just feel that it's a valuable program, and we've noticed that many of you continue to come on and continue to join us and want to learn more and hear from some of these wonderful guests. But as an organization, we're making a few changes. And as an organization, we're moving away from GoToWebinar. I think some of you may be happy to hear that, because I know many of you struggle when you first come on and you're like, I can't hear them, I can't see them. We get those questions. Unfortunately, there's nothing that we can do without being right with you in front of your computer. And it's not personal to GoToWebinar. It's strictly business that we're making this decision and moving away. And so for that reason, it gave us an opportunity to kind of take a look at COS at Home and say, what do we want to do? Is there a way that we can make this content and this program better? And what we decided to do is we're going to change, instead of a webinar style program, we're going to change to a format of a live streaming show. Similar, as you may know, it's similar to other programs that we have, such as the Battle Cry, COS Live. Some of those other programs that we've done are live streaming shows. Actually, some of those are now being recorded, but they were live. And this is going to continue to be live. We will continue to have guests, but also feature other segments, like I mentioned, the legislative update, and we're also going to have a mailbag. For this to be successful, though, we want you in our audience to help us make it better. In the coming weeks, we're going to be providing you with a survey to ask you what kind of guests you'd like to see, what type of topics you'd like to see discussed, and to provide us with some feedback on the day, the time, and a couple other questions as well. So please participate by answering the questions of this survey so that we can continue to bring the content that you enjoy and help you in learning more about not just Convention of States, but ways to be a true self-governing activist. And I know a number of times people will say to us and ask questions and say, why am I tuning in and not hearing about Convention of States? Or why am I hearing from this person about this issue or that? And the reason for that is, first of all of the guests that we come on, we ultimately tie it back to Convention of States. There's not been a guest that we have on where we don't talk about issues or ways that Convention of States can help solve the problems that we're facing as a country. But we're going to expand on that a little bit more. We're going to have people come on that may not necessarily be endorsers of Convention of States. They'll certainly be friendly to Article 5 and what it is we're trying to accomplish, but we'll be able to provide you with important things and information about important issues of our day. And as I mentioned, in order for us to truly, truly restore our society to a self-governing country, then we have to be engaged at all levels, from school board local, on up to state, on up to federal, right? So we have to know about everything that's going on. I know it sounds daunting, and you think about all of these things and you're like, how am I going to cover it all? Well, here's the thing. The people that are representing us, they don't know everything either, right? Many of them know less than you and I do. And in fact, I even mentioned this to a couple of my teams recently. When it comes to Article 5, we're more of the experts than some of our legislators are, because they have so many other issues that they're focused on that they don't have the time to really dig into an issue. So you just need to be able to have a surface knowledge on some of these really important things for you to be able to engage as a self-governing citizen. And we want to be able to help you with that education. So we're going to be having some guests come on and talk about some of these important things. And don't think that we're going to forget about Convention of States. Absolutely not. It's called COS at Home for a reason. So we're going to continue to talk about COS. And like I said, that legislative update, we'll be talking about COS quite often. In addition, we're also going to talk about what are some of the ways that you can get involved, specific actions you can take. And some of them are going to just be from the comfort of your own home, right? It is COS at home after all. So we want to share some things with you to make you an extremely active and engaged citizen without even leaving the comfort of your own home. So I hope that you'll join us. I'm really excited about some of the things that we're going to be doing, and I hope you will be too, because I think this is going to make this an even better program and bring you a lot of quality content. So with that, we're going to move to the final segment of tonight, and we're going to go and cover some mailbag questions. So of course, a main feature of the program has always been getting questions from the audience. And typically we'll take live Q&A for the guests that we have that come on to COS at Home. And I want them to be able to interact directly with you to the best that we can. And that's why we take those questions and answers. But we want to take it a step further, and we want to address some of the questions that you might have specifically about Convention of States. So that's why we're going to have this mailbag segment of the program moving forward. Now, obviously, we weren't necessarily planning to do some of these segments tonight because we thought we were going to be able to have a usual program with Congressman Chip Roy, and unfortunately, we weren't able to do that, though we're excited to have him coming on in the future. But some of you did send in some questions to him, specifically to Congressman Roy, that I think I might be able to answer. So forgive me, I'm not Congressman Roy, and he is an excellent leader and will be able to probably answer these even better given his perspective. But I do think that I can answer and help address some of the concerns that we had from people who wrote in. So let's go ahead and get to it. Kelly wrote in and said, do you have an understanding of why so many of our elected politicians are unconcerned about the growing debt and the ballooning deficit? Now, that's one question. And then Mark wrote in, it was a very similar question. And he said, has anyone in Congress ever tried to introduce a simple balanced budget amendment? So to take Mark's question first, and these are very similar, yes, the answer is yes. Congressmen have introduced a balanced budget amendment before, and it doesn't go anywhere. And the reason for that gets to the reason of why, or gets to the answer of what Kelly is asking. You have an understanding of why they're unconcerned about the growing debt and ballooning deficit. I would say there are obviously some. I would say Congressman Roy is probably one of them. Some of the other congressmen that have endorsed Convention of States and senators that have endorsed Convention of States obviously have concern about the growing debt and ballooning deficit. But why aren't they going to do anything about it? Well, because ultimately, what is the deficit? The deficit is the amount of money that we're spending beyond our means, that go beyond our budget, right? Who's going to cut that spending? Who's going to cut that deficit? Who's going to bring it down to actually balance the budget? And what does that look like? What do those cuts mean to what the United States is currently spending? Well, if you go back and you remember the late great Dr. Tom Coburn, nicknamed Dr. No, he released each year this list of things that we were spending money on foolishly, ridiculous things. I believe Senator Rand Paul has done that as well. And if you look at the United States budget, there is so much fat in there that could be easily cut. But that's not going to get us to where we need to be. We're going to have to make some significant cuts. And why do these politicians why aren't they concerned about it? At the end of the day, the politicians don't want to cut it because they know it's not going to be popular, right? We as a society have become so used to being on the government dole that when it comes time to taking some of that money back, whether it's through Social Security, subsidies, whatever it is, people don't want to let go of what they're currently receiving. And let's face it, states are getting a lot of the money. And that's part of the reason that the federal government has so much control over what a state legislature does. I believe Dr. Coburn said on average, 60% of a state's budget is controlled by the federal government through various different regulations, and money is tied to that. So imagine that when you go to the ballot box, you vote for your state legislator, your state rep, your state senator, you're sending them there and they're only going to do 40% of their job, right? Because 60% of their budget is controlled by the federal government. That's insane. That's crazy. But none of these politicians actually have the backbone or the will to go and do that. And part of the problem isn't just them, it's us. That is the issue. We are the ones that are connected to it. We are the ones that would punish them if they tried to get the financial house in order because it would hurt us personally. Of course, the best part about living in America, the best part about our constitutional republic is that if we're the problem, we're also the solution. And by having a Article 5 convention where we take that responsibility away from the representatives in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, and we say, no, our state legislators go to this convention, and ultimately we send them there, we're part of the process, and 38 states ratify this amendment and says, you are required to balance the budget. You're required to do some cutting of the spending and only spend certain amount of money. It takes that political issue, if you will, off the table. And it requires them to do that. That's why in so many states, there are balanced budgets. And they do balance the budget. Even some of the deep blue states balance the budget. Why? Because in their state constitutions, there are balanced budget amendments or similar amendments that require them to do it. So it's not a political issue. And they won't be beat over the head for doing it because they're complying with the law. So that's why we have to take it out of their hands, and we have to be the ones that say no more. But a part of that is going to hurt some of us, and we have to be willing to handle that. Because if you think about your own personal budget, if you're making money, you're not going to continue to spend beyond your means, right? Well, we're not going to be able to go on vacation. We're not going to be able to do some of the things that we want to do. We're not going to be able to go to we don't go to Disney anymore, right? Maybe we go to Universal, maybe Busch Gardens. Only kidding. But we're not going to go on vacation. We're not going to go and buy a new car. We're not going to do these things because it goes beyond our means. We say no to ourselves, or we say no to our kids or to our grandkids because we just don't have that money right now. Federal government, they're not saying no. It's not their money that they're spending. It's your money. It's my money. Well, what are they doing? They're giving it to us in other ways and enslaving us to the state. And so we have to be the ones to say no. That's why we are the solution. So I hope that answers Kelly and Mark's question. And I think they're great questions, and I will absolutely be bringing them up with Congressman Roy when he joins us next month. So with that, folks, we're going to conclude tonight's webinar. Obviously, it's a little earlier than usual. We usually have this going a little bit longer than tonight. And I'll be honest, the show is going to go a little bit longer as well because we want to include some of that important content for you. But again, I'd just like to say, first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting Convention of States. Thank you for supporting Convention of States at Home. I'm incredibly grateful for that. And I'm thankful that you're willing to be a part of this movement or willing to learn more because, again, one of the truths I think that we don't recognize as a people is that the government that we have is the government that we tolerate and that we allow. Again, we're the problem, but we're also the solution. And we can come together as a group of people and say no and do what we need to do to preserve the freedoms and prosperity for our children and for posterity. So again, I encourage you, please go to conventionofstates.com, click on that Take Action tab at the top of the homepage, sign up to become a volunteer, join us in this fight. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for all of your support. God bless you, and I look forward to seeing you in February and beyond. Take care.